Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day I explore a different area in business that is being transformed by technology. But in many cases, it's invisible and taken for granted by users. And today's guest is Ray Brash, who is the CEO and chairman of a company called PPS, formerly known as Prepay Solutions. And he has amassed over 20 years' experience in retail, e-commerce, finance and information services. And prior to joining PPS back in 2004, Ray was also the finance director at The Economist and previously held leadership roles at United News and Media, Telstar Electronic Studios, Kingfisher and PwC. But today I want to hear more about PPS that has an incredibly successful track record of delivering programs that are innovative, but also deliver scale to leading fintechs. Because many players can do one or the other, but very few can do them both. And this seems to be the real strength for PPS, providing reliable services to challenger banks while also supporting its customers' day-to-day financial needs. So in partnership with parent company Edenred, I want to learn more about how PPS is driving the migration of mobile payments technology, and is also the beating heart of the digital payments industry in a wealth of sectors, including banking, retail, mobile and travel. In fact, we're all surrounded by that technology, but very few of us dare to look behind the curtain and see how it all works. And just to hammer home that point, I think the company has served over 210 client programs across 30 plus countries around the world. And this is the big stinger, processed in excess of 2 billion transactions and a total of 36 billion across fintech, corporate payments, retail portfolio, and is Europe's biggest Apple Pay issuer. But enough from me. You don't tune in to hear me rambling on. Buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to London here in the UK so we can speak with Ray now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Ray. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, the last one I might struggle. Some of my colleagues might claim that that's a little bit opaque. But I'm the CEO and chairman of PPS, formerly Prepay Solutions. And we are a payment issuer processor in the EU and now globally as well.
And you've also got over 20 years experience in retail, e-commerce, finance and information services. But you're also with the finance director at The Economist and held leadership roles at United News and Media, Telstar Electronic Studios, Kingfisher and PwC. But I'm curious, I've got to ask, what put you on this path and what helped get you where you are today? Can you still remember where your passion for tech came from?
Yeah, I guess I can. I was an accountant by training at PwC, but I was always interested in how businesses fitted together. And for me, my approach at the time was through numbers and through data and the finances of a particular company. It felt like it was the blood pumping around that. So I started after I left PwC in retail. And of course, the great thing about retail is it's very relevant. Everyone knows, well, certainly is getting used to, again, what a shop looks like after 4 months. But everyone understands how retail works. And therefore, to be in finance within retailer, I was working at Kingfisher, meant that every day there was a relevancy. So the price of a Mars bar, how much margin we were making, what was the position of the Lion King on video, how many DVDs were we going to be selling at Christmas. So it was kind of fun. And it got me really into thinking that actually business for me is about numbers, but also the relevancy. So when I took my next role, which was at Telstar, it was actually a friend who was setting up a computer games company. And this is sort of 1993. So that got me into the tech side of things because we were creating video games for PlayStation formats So we had our own software developers with kind of massive silicon graphic machines, sort of huge expense, in the very early days of the internet. So creating a computer game, building a solution, it kind of was the first time I'd ever really been exposed to development and technology. And you could see that there was always a fine line between success and failure. After that, I moved into some media roles and again started to see how media and data and the internet and everything was kind of coming together in terms of how content was being distributed. That led me on to The Economist, where again the company was going through a transition around 2000, moving from one format, which was paper, to a new format, which was digital, and the disruption it caused within the whole company into everything from the editorial position to the production to the marketing to the accounting, and that led me on to PPS. And PPS, as a payment solutions business, it's all about displacing forms of payment. So, the original coin, then paper, gift vouchers, meal vouchers, checks, travelers' checks, etc. So there's a common theme actually throughout. It certainly wasn't by design, and I was very lucky about moving into all those different roles. But the fundamental thing in all of those roles has been taking on a legacy form factor and bringing some new technology to make a better experience for the customer.
And over the last 20 years, you've seen the whole digital landscape completely evolve, and it's continuing to evolve, of course. But here in 2020, can you tell me more about PPS and the kind of problems that you're solving with technology?
I think they're the same problems that technology is solving for everyone, in every industry. And, fundamentally, that's about relevancy. It's about convenience. It's about very demanding customer expectations. And in payments, for too long, it hasn't been the case. So what we're helping companies do is create financial services offers that are very relevant to the particular user group. They will solve very specific problems that user group has with a very, very high level of service and a great user experience. So that's the same. It's no different in food delivery, TV content, music, or transportation. Everyone's kind of doing the same thing, and we enable companies to do that by effectively taking a lot of the hard bits away and really allowing our customers to do what they're great at, which is come up with a great proposition, great design, great user experience, and really engage with the end users and be very relevant for them.
And one of the big changes, of course, over the last few years is we're all carrying a supercomputer in our pocket now. We expect to do everything using our smartphone. So can you tell me more about how you're driving the migration of mobile payments technology and how it's become the beating heart of the digital payments industry in a wealth of sectors now, again, including banking, retail, mobile and travel, because it's so far-reaching, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not just today that we're doing it. And mobile is not just about the payment, it's about the engagement with the customer and the servicing of the offer. And if I go back to 2005, 2006, we launched some early prepaid cards. One was called Splash Plastic. And that product had things like balance inquiry with a text message. And in fact, you could even buy that product using a text message, a premium text message, and you had a mobile app, and actually that was pretty revolutionary compared to every other bank. So we kind of realized that for that user group, and quite often in that market, it might be migrant workers or people who were, moving around the country, perhaps didn't have this moving from job to job, and actually what they did have was a mobile phone. That was the one thing they had, and they might not have had a computer, they might not have had a branch they would go to. So actually delivering financial services through that medium was something we've been doing for almost 14 years now. So that was the servicing piece. I think a real milestone for us would have been around about 2012, where we launched with EE, the first mobile payment product in the UK, cash on tap. And that was a journey, a very tricky journey for us and for all the partners involved, because there were a lot of complexities in taking traditional card payments and moving them into a mobile-only environment, especially around things like security. But we were able to deliver that product, and it gave us a first kind of insight into how our payment technology would need to adapt to this different form factor. And that's really gone on to do, for us, it's been a real benefit, because when Apple wanted to launch in the UK or in Europe, they gave us a call, and myself and my CTO, you get a call from Apple, tell us a bit about kind of payments in Europe, and the next thing you're on a plane to California for a 2-hour meeting. But it's Apple, and actually now PPS is the largest Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay issuer in Europe in terms of the number of deployments. So that early kind of thought process just builds and builds and builds. You never know if it's gonna pay off. Sometimes you just have to go with a sort of instinct and gut feel. So I think that's what really we've been doing. And for our customers, we sit behind. So all of the tricky things around payments in the mobile world, we're managing within our architecture, within our compliance framework and everything else. And our customers can, present that to their users using a mobile app.
And I'm curious, when you went for that 2-hour meeting with Apple, was it in the big new campus there, the big new building? Did you get to go around there?
Funny enough, it was just taking shape.
Oh.
So I did remember, weirdly, because of the time difference, we had some hours to kill. So we went to a traditional British pub, which was right next to the campus. And you walked inside, and it was weird because it was like walking into a pub of the late 70s, those who are old enough to remember that. And it was full of British developers who all worked for Apple, so the guide corner of the market. But no, the campus was just being built, and I think at that time Apple had something like 80 offices around that area. But it was a really interesting time, because you could just get a sense of how a tech company didn't really know about payments, and they were just trying to sort of think about, okay, what were the best approaches? And of course, they managed to organize themselves very well. And when Apple Pay launched in the UK, I think within a few days, that technology had already overtaken what we'd been doing for a couple of years. So, but the good thing was we were also enabled for that as well. So we've been able to move on since then.
Excellent. And not only are you Europe's biggest Apple Pay issuer, you also have, I believe, over 210 client programs across 30 countries around the world, processing in excess of 2 billion transactions with the total value of 36 billion across fintech, corporate payments and retail portfolios, which is just mind-blowing. But I've got to ask, what are the biggest challenges in achieving all that, and indeed more?
The challenge is the diversity of the customer base we have. So a retailer has very different challenges than maybe a large corporate who's trying to solve some legacy payment issues, who has a different challenge from a startup who might be very young and has a blank sheet of paper. So they all ultimately have very different challenges. So our approach and the way we've tried to build our business is to create a core processing platform, which we actually call Picasso. And if you were to look at that platform, every transaction, you talked about the 2 billion transactions, every one of them is very similar. And the retail the corporate, the fintech, the fuel card transaction, they're all behaving exactly the same way. So there's not too much customization going on in the core engine, which means it's very efficient and we can scale it. But then what we have to do is to create a kind of experience layer that we sit on top of that, which turns that kind of mix of payment processing into something that looks like a challenger bank service or something that looks like a gift card. So that's been the biggest challenge of dealing with those, being relevant to your customer, but at the same time, be able to scale, give your customer the experience that they feel is tailored for them, but know that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel 5 or 6 times. That's from a technology point of view. I think from the geographical point of view, many of our programs are regulated, and we are a regulated issuer in the UK and in the EU. We have a separate office in Brussels. So tailoring those programs to specific regulation in all the different countries is also a challenge, I suppose, when you're doing that. But I always felt that the markets we were going into for payments would be big, but it was better for us to spread our net quite wide and see which ones were picking up the big haul of fish, rather than go after one very specific channel and find out that perhaps you're not relevant or that market doesn't exist.
And so much of what you do goes on behind the scenes and largely invisible to many of the users out there. And you've also supported retailers such as, I think, Sainsburys during the COVID-19 outbreak there with launches of volunteer shopping cards. Can you expand on that a little as well for anyone that doesn't know about that?
Yeah, of course. So clearly, as we all know, the shops that did stay open were the food shops for strategic reasons. And you can imagine if lockdown, if all the supermarkets had shut as well, there would have been chaos on the streets. So it was strategically important that the supermarkets were kept open. And our part is we provide digital vouchers for Sainsburys that are normally used for gifting. So you might receive, if you sign up to a mobile phone contract or something, you might receive a £100 voucher digitally to go and spend at Sainsburys. That's the normal application. But in the times of lockdown, there were some specific requirements that the government had. First of all, it was to allow parents of poorer parents of children who would normally get free school meals. They weren't at school, so it was to enable them to receive a voucher digitally, which they could go into their supermarket and buy the food for their lunch. Okay, that was the free school meals part of it. And then the second part of taking these digital vouchers and using them very specifically was for volunteers of people who were sheltering, and people are still sheltering. It's coming to an end, but I think a lot of people are still doing it, who couldn't go outside. Perhaps the delivery services were maxed out, as we all know. So people would basically receive, I would say to my volunteer, can you buy me this? I'll send you the voucher. The volunteer would use the voucher on behalf of the sheltered person. 2 applications, quite different, using the core technology the same. And the key point here was that we were already doing digital vouchers, digital, form factors for Sainsburys. So it was quite relatively straightforward to repurpose those very quickly for specific uses in lockdown. But the theme was always the same, which is, convenience, digital, zero friction, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of one of the things that we did during lockdown to help the economy keep going.
And something else that I read that you're also doing as well was powering the companies that were making a real difference to government legislation through things like lobbying initiatives for small businesses during COVID-19. So you can tell the listener a little bit more about that as well, because again, a lot of this goes unseen or is almost invisible to people, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think when you talk about small businesses, you might imagine 50 people in on a sort of an estate making widgets or something. Actually, the Deliveroo driver is a small business in a way, and there's been a huge growth in the economy of people setting up their own businesses, whether it's consulting, whether it's services delivery, internet, etc., and that kind of goes unseen, I think, when you look at the economy, how important that was. And a lot of our customers, are providing services in that sector because, frankly, the traditional banks, and if you use examples like RBS going back, have frankly poorly served that part of the market. They've not been interested in setting up a corporate relationship with someone who perhaps is running a tattoo parlor or something, So our customers are servicing those needs. And in doing that, they realized that during lockdown, there were other aspects of this group that were not being serviced. So lending, for example, but also things like furlough, which was applicable if you were employed, but wouldn't apply if you were self-employed. So a couple of our customers, Coconut, for example, one of our SMEs, they were very vocal in lobbying for, furlough to be extended to self-employed, things like rate relief, lending, all that kind of thing. And I suppose we weren't, we're not a political business, so I'm not going to come and make a political statement that I think the government's doing this right or wrong or whatever. I can leave my customers to do that. But what we were able to do was provide the foundation, which is the payment services. So the customers were using our services through our clients, and then once you've engaged with a small business and you're making payments for them, it was easier for our clients to communicate, and they were able to use examples. So because of all the data that we produce is we give to our customers, they own it, our clients that is, and they were able to analyze trends in terms of payments being going down, income coming down, where people were spending perhaps more money on online. And all of that enabled them to make a strong argument to the government that it was the small businesses. And I have to say, they did a great job. But when I look at the performance of some of these companies through lockdown, it's been staggeringly good because these small businesses were keeping the economy going. And individuals who might be, your Amazon driver or someone who's, helping distribute food or something like that, or working in small manufacturing, let's say, sanitizers, that kind of thing. Those businesses kept the economy really ticking over. And we could see that because we were doing more transactions than we'd done prior to lockdown with some of these customers.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think it's hard to imagine that just 8 months ago we were celebrating a new year, a new decade, big plans for the future, and then suddenly everything changed and everyone had to start thinking about how do they pivot. So from the conversations that you've been having with your clients during this year and during this big upheaval, are there any trends that you think will shape the next 18 months and beyond? Yeah,
I think the digital trend of online shopping, everyone talks about that. I think Jeff Bezos suddenly became the richest man in the world overnight, which means people need electronic forms of payment. People need contactless payment, and if that's delivered through a mobile device or some other medium, we're there to help. So that's an obvious trend.
Yeah.
But I think also the ability to very quickly flex to your customer needs. So again, a lot of our customers in the fintech space, they were very engaged with their customers. So they were getting feedback all the time, some of it not positive, and to be honest, but they were taking that on board about how they can make their services more relevant. They're getting a lot of data, and because of the nature of fintechs, they're able to be very agile, deliver new functionality very quickly. For example, we changed a lot of the transaction limits very quickly to allow for grants and loans to come in. We changed the contactless limits. So what that meant was that a customer of let's say one of my clients like Tide, they really got a sense of, well, this is what my financial partner should be like. They not only give me a great service, but they give me great features, convenience, a great value proposition, but they're actually helping me with my business, whether that's how to do invoicing, how to, where can I go to get money back from the government through the crisis. So that trend will continue. And what I mean by that is the real value in having a financial services partner. So even after lockdown, even after, hopefully we've come through all of this and things are back to slightly more normal times, those customers will look back and say, Tide, Counting Up, Coconut, all of these guys, they really supported me. And that's what I expect. And that's the standard I expect. And I believe that a lot of the traditional banks have let customers down. And therefore, that will change, that will shift the paradigm. You're no longer a utility. Banks aren't existing just because you have to have a bank account and, you go to the one that's the least painful. Customers will now expect a whole raft of additional services and value adds. And I think that's been born through the lockdown period, actually.
And what about cash? Do you think more and more people will be more self-conscious about handling cash and naturally start adopting mobile payments more?
I did a presentation a couple of years ago on cash, and I put up a slide with a toilet seat showing that there's more germs on a $20 bill than there is on your average public toilet seat. And I think, so I don't know about handling cash. I don't know about you, but I think I've touched a £10 note once in the last 4 months, and that was because I had some in my wallet and my son wanted to go down the pub. But I mean, we saw a massive skew away from ATM withdrawals into point of sale. There's been a little bit of a recovery, but I would say there's a permanent shift away from it. And not just in the UK or Europe, but we do payroll programs in other countries like Dubai. And there, where traditionally ATM usage was quite high, because a lot of the places where you would spend the cash were shut, exchange houses and the like, there was another skew towards point of sale. And, in the end, retail is moving online very rapidly. And even retailers who are physical are, encouraging people not to use cash, or in some places you can't use cash. So I would say, I could go on for another hour, Neil, about that. But, you have to say what is cash really good for? Okay, it doesn't need a battery, and, but at the same time, there are many issues with cash, the cost and, the how it's used. And, the one thing I heard a lot we heard a lot from the government is the government was here to help people, businesses, retail, travel, restaurants, etc. I think tomorrow night I'm going for my 50% eat out deal in my local restaurant, which I'm looking forward to. That all has to be paid for, okay? And it has to be paid for through tax. Now, cash has generally been an enemy of tax. And I'd say, I wouldn't be afraid to say that. Therefore, e-commerce gets a little bit more money back into the economy than cash, so it's probably a good thing.
And there is a lot of doom and gloom out there at the moment, especially with the 24-hour rolling news channels. But is there anything that excites you or makes you hopeful about the future, so we can end on a positive note?
Well, you're asking the wrong person, because I'm always excited about the future. You could probably put me in most scenarios and I'd still come up with a positive spin on it. No, I mean, I'm very excited about the future, very excited, because, there is so much energy in the payment space, in one space that I'm familiar with, about making things better, okay? And whether that is making things cheaper, making better products for customers, making financial services more accessible, making fraud a smaller issue, by allowing customers to send money back to their families if they're working overseas quicker and cheaper, allow businesses to reduce costs because they need to reduce costs. So all of that energy hasn't gone away. In fact, I'd say it's amplified. So, we see more noise now. We signed probably more customers in the lockdown period than we had for probably 12 months before that. So there's no stopping of the energy to make things better, and technology is the way to do it. And we see that accelerating. So fortunately, as I say, we're in digital payments, and I think still in the world, 90% of payments are still cash. So we've got a long way to go. The whole experience for everyone in lockdown has just accelerated that trend, which was already there. So I'm very optimistic about the future. And I'm also, have to say, very excited about the new way of working. Like many companies, we were 97% remote working for 100 days or more, and still are in some of our spaces. And the resounding feedback from my staff was that they really liked many aspects of it. There was always going to be some issues in terms of childcare and some gremlins of technology and the like, but a fundamental desire for staff to say, look, we want to work in a different way. You've trusted us and we've repaid that trust. And, I've seen productivity improve in the company, and I've seen, engagement improve, which is incredible when you think about it. People aren't together and yet they're more engaged and more productive. So I'm very excited about that, and how we can really take the way of work, into a much more civilized way, and a much more adult and trusting way, and make people's working lives better. So that's probably one of the biggest things, I think, to come out of lockdown.
I love that. And before I let you go, just for anyone that would like to keep up to speed with the work that you're doing, or maybe even reach out to a member of your team, what's the best way of finding you online?
We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, both at PPS. Our website is pps.edenred.com, or you can search for Prepay Solutions, or you can follow me on Twitter at Ray-Brash. Or you can, and if you go to our website, you'll see some of our customers. And, I think if you're interested in what we can do, go and look at what some of the things our customers are doing. And I'll need to remind you that PPS is underneath the bonnet and helping those customers do it. So I'm sure we can help many other customers deliver that as well.
And like you said there, so much of what you do is under the bonnet and it's invisible to so many people. But I can't thank you enough for just allowing us to take a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, and learn about these 2 billion transactions, 36 billion across fintech, corporate payments and retail portfolio. The fact that you're Europe's biggest Apple Pay issuer, and not to mention the volunteer shopping cards you did with Sainsburys. So much great work, and it does need to be shouted about. And hopefully we don't all take that technology for granted too when we pay for our items. But more than anything, just a big thank you for sharing your story with me today, Ray.
No, that's been great. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much, Neil.
So most recently, PPS has launched the first ever e-money wallet to offer credit with Koto, providing 2 different ways to select and repay credit, based on the user's immediate need. And they've also supported huge retailers such as Sainsburys during COVID-19 with launches of volunteer shopping cards that are enabling friends and helpers to shop on the behalf of elderly, disabled or vulnerable person together with other customers who would just not have been able to shop for themselves without something like this. But like so many companies on here that I feature every single day, I think as users, we're often guilty of taking this kind of technology for granted. So I hope you enjoyed taking a peek behind the curtain and enjoyed today's interview as much as I did and maybe learnt a thing or two, because I know I did. But please, as always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. And let me know your thoughts on listening to today's interview and indeed anything else. But I'm afraid we're at the end of another episode, so all that's left for me to say is a genuine thank you for choosing to listen to this podcast every day. I appreciate it more than you all know, and hopefully you'll join me again tomorrow to do it all again. So until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.